couple of minutes, and we will then interrupt wherever we're at to establish a quorum. Today we have 3 gubernatorial appointees appearing today for confirmation. And I would like to begin by inviting our colleague, Senator Lois Wolk, to come on up. And I'd also like to ask Patricia G. Leary, who is up for confirmation as the Chief Deputy Director for the State Department of Social Services, and Will Lightbourne, who is up as Director of the State Department of Social Services. I think we're going to need to add one more chair, if we might. And I don't know, Senator Wolk, you're welcome to stay the whole time, but I assume that you won't be, and then we'll be able to work it out. Senator Wolk, welcome to the committee.
Thank you, Senators. Senator Steinberg, Mr. Chair, members, I want to introduce and express my support for Pat Leary, who is currently serving as the Deputy Director for the State Department of Social Services. I've known Pat for many, many years. For the past 6 years, she's been the Assistant County Administrator for Yolo County. And her major responsibilities were being in charge of the budget at a time when you know how difficult that can be at the county level, and oversight of all fiscal issues for the county. And she did a tremendous job. She was a source of knowledge and energy, and did a phenomenal job for Yolo County. And prior to that, many of you may know her from her work with CSAC, where she worked on state and local, again, fiscal reform issues, worked on the successful effort with the legislature support to pass Prop 1A. And before that, she was one of us. She worked in the Senate Budget Committee for many years. She was a key staffer who worked in welfare reform legislation and foster care reform in the 90s. She has also been a legislative director for our member. She really knows our process. She knows the issues, and I think she will be an excellent, excellent appointee. And I urge your confirmation of her position, of her in that position. I also want to indicate that a former Assemblywoman, Helen Thompson, former supervisor, who actually worked with Pat on the Board of Supervisors, is here today. And
welcome to our beloved colleague, Helen Thompson.
I ask for your support.
Right, very good. Thank you very much, Senator Wolk. Let me, may I have a member up? Yes, we do. We'll interrupt just for a moment, call the roll to establish quorum, please.
Senators Alquist, DeLeon, Fuller, here. Fuller here, Dutton, here. Dutton here, Steinberg.
Here.
Steinberg here. Quorum
has been established. The record reflect I'm outnumbered 2-1, but there we go. Senator Alquist is here as well. Wait, Senator DeLeon. Let me, before I ask each of the nominees to make a brief opening statement, to introduce any member of your family or special guest who's here with you today, as is our tradition, just make a very brief opening comment. This is not a budget hearing. You've been through that, I know, over the last week or so. And yet, inevitably, as the Rules Committee considers not only the qualifications of the nominees, but explores some of the issues within your jurisdiction, there will be some overlap in our discussion here today. And I suppose the thing that I just want to say, speaking obviously for myself here, is that we all recognize that we are living in extraordinarily difficult budget times. This is nothing new. Been going at this since 2009, since I took over the leadership of the Senate. I do think that it is very important that when we have a dialogue about these issues, that we clearly distinguish between that which is primarily budget-driven and may be necessary, still to be debated and when we see what the revenue is, and that which is policy reform-driven. And I fear and feel that too much in these discussions that we don't adequately separate those two. Because there are some things that we ought to do as a matter of reform and policy that coincidentally save money. And then there are things that, if given my choice, I wouldn't do, but may be necessary because of the necessity of saving money. And so as we have that discussion to some degree today, and again, this isn't the budget hearing, I want to be real cognizant of that difference and ask that you, as I believe you're going to be successful in these confirmation hearings, that as you get beyond this and pursue your public responsibilities, that you are always clear on that distinction, and that we're not defending things on policy grounds that are primarily cost-cutting measures, and vice versa. That's my soapbox opening comment here. Opening statements, introduction of family and special guests. We welcome you to the Rules Committee.
I would just like to introduce my family. I have with me today my twin daughters, Erin and Claire. And
welcome to you.
My mother-in-law, Genevieve Leary from Vallejo.
Thank you. We remember Lou fondly. Sure do. Thank you.
Unfortunately, my family is not here. My partner is at work, and the two kids are off at school preparing for midterms. But it's a pleasure to be here, Senator.
Welcome to you. Welcome to you. Mr. Director, okay, have you prepared opening statements?
Briefly, Chair Steinberg and committee members. I'd just like to say it's an honor to have been appointed by Governor Brown to be director of the Department of Social Services, and it's an honor to be considered by your committee for confirmation. Since 1975, when I began my work in human services with Catholic Charities, and in the years since then there and as county director in several counties, I've absolutely believed that the opportunity to develop and deliver services to the poorest and most vulnerable of our fellow residents is the highest calling that there is. And I've been graced to be able to spend my entire adult life in that mission. My response to your questionnaire covers a number of areas. I won't try to recap them now. I'd just like to summarize what I see as being sort of the essence of my priorities. First, work with our partners, the counties, and with our other stakeholders, particularly consumer advocates, the legislature, to make sure that the services we provide to the people of California are of the highest standard, the highest performance, and that we have measures of accountability that ensure that. This is true of all of our programs, but particularly in the era of the realignment of child welfare, the need to increase participation in the CalFresh program, the need to increase work participation in the CalWorks program, and the need to ensure consumer rights and protections in the in-home support services program. Secondly, with our counties and community-based partners, do everything we can to simplify and streamline the services we offer to the people. And then finally, make sure that everything we do is completely transparent so that while people may not agree with every decision we have to make, they can understand why decisions were made and that they were made on a level playing field. So I stop there, Senators, and be happy to respond to any questions.
Thank you. Ms. Leary?
I'll hopefully be even briefer. I just really want to echo Director Lightbourne's sentiments about being an honor to be here. After spending 19 years in and around this building, it truly is a privilege and an honor to receive a governor's appointment. As I worked on issues through this building, like all of you have a great diversity of issues, and you get to work on a lot of things. I worked on things from gangs to groundwater, but there was nothing in my career here and since in Yolo County that was more meaningful than the work that I was able to do with Senate Budget Committee on CalWorks, on foster care, on in-home supportive services. These are programs that are very near and dear because they protect our most vulnerable populations. And throughout my work, I've always looked back on those fondly as some of my most proud moments for having worked on them. As I've sort of transitioned from between the legislature, the lobbying world, working for counties, and then working specifically in a county as an administrator, I've struggled with the us versus them pronoun gap that continually goes on, and I've always kind of considered it my mission to try and bring us and them together into the us category. I think that it helps a lot to bring that different perspective into that world. And these are, as you know, much, much better than I, difficult times and important times, and then there are important decisions to be made, and I'm really honored to have the opportunity to help make them.
Thank you. Thank you both. Let me, if I might begin the questioning here. First of all, how would you respond to my opening comments about the distinction between policy reform for reform's sake and policy reform that is, whose primary purpose is to save money?
First, Senator, I appreciate the distinction, and at the same time, we've been sort of in a budget crisis for so long that there is a almost constant process of trying to be sure that we are doing both that which we think is effective and doing that as efficiently as we possibly can. And so there is a line that blurs. And also, as has been commented on very often, the Health and Human Services side of the budget is that part where there is, relatively speaking, some discretion, and that when there is budget pressure, we will feel it very strongly. Therefore, it's a line we have to preserve, and we have to remember why we are doing what we're doing and the outcomes that we're trying to get from that. Certainly the dialogue that we've begun with the budget committees on both sides, folk are very focused on that question, and they're alive to both of the pressures that we're trying to reconcile.
Ms. Leary?
The only thing that I would add to that is, as you know, it's a Gordian knot between budgeting and policy. A lot of the decisions that are made for purely budgetary reasons in any given year cumulatively represent policy over a period of time. And so the line is never as bright as we'd like it to be, because the decisions we make about how we spend our money indicate what our where our policies lie, or where the priorities are, given the set of circumstances that we have. And so we are really committed to sort of working all sides of the decision making, from the policy through the budgetary, through the number crunching, to being cognizant of what the policy is behind those decisions.
It is a fair statement to say, is it not, that the net result of some of the reforms proposed by the administration result in a direct reduction of services or fewer recipients eligible for services in the areas that you're responsible for administering?
Yes, Senator, particularly in the CalWORKS program. That and potentially the in-home support services program, where it wouldn't be necessarily a reduction in the number of recipients, but the range of services provided.
Okay, I appreciate that. I want to focus in on one specific issue that is very troubling to me. Then I'll turn it over to my colleagues for their questions, and I may come back. And it's the issue which received some attention in the newspapers and in the public several months ago about the CalWORKS overpayment collection. As you know, the policy of the department has been to collect overpayments even in so-called child-only cases, regardless of the age of the minor or the circumstance surrounding the overpayment. And several months ago, as a result of a lot of back and forth that I know I participated in, the department made a decision that it would no longer collect overpayments against an adult who was a child at the time the overpayment occurred. So in other words, if an individual, a 20-year-old's mother, received an overpayment in a child-only case back when the child was 5, so long as the child reached the age of majority, the department's decision is to no longer seek to collect that overpayment against the adult. However, the department's policy is to continue to seek to collect the overpayment so long as that 5-year-old, in the hypothetical that I just put forward, is less than 18. So if you're 22 or 23 or 24 or 25, and you're maybe even in the work world, you might be able to afford, maybe, to pay back what was owed the state. But but you don't have to pay it back. But if you're a minor and you're on your own, or you're with a different parent, or in a child welfare setting, you're being forced to pay back that money. That distinction troubles me greatly, and I'd like to know why that policy continues to be the policy of the department.
The requirement under law is that when an overpayment of public funds is made, the state through the counties must try to recover the overpayment. Frankly, I was unaware of until the issue surfaced through the advocates, and we became engaged in it together, was that in the application of that principle, we were literally sort of hounding what were now young adults who had left the family group into sort of their new restarted lives in a setting where there was no way of recouping it simply via abatement of future payments, but rather pursuit of recovery. And so after consulting with the legal staff, it was agreed that there was a permissible interpretation that former minor, now young adult, had actually left the family group, and therefore the statutory requirement had changed. For the child who remains in a child-only assistance unit, as it's termed, the fact remains that the recovery continues via reduction in future payments. And our understanding from the legal perspective is that will take statutory change to stop the practice. If there's interest in pursuing it, we'll certainly work with the legislature in looking at the policy implications, the numbers, the factors. You do have to just note the fact that there are some people with concerns. You could wind up with children in slightly dissimilar circumstances being treated differently. And there are issues around that, but not to get bogged down there. We'd certainly be willing to work with that.
Well, lawyers, as we know, give opinions.
Right.
And sometimes different lawyers give different opinions. And many of these administrative interpretations are not ironclad. And so are you saying that the department believes it has absolutely no discretion to halt the collection of overpayments against a 14-year-old who may actually be with a different custodian than the custodian who received the overpayment back when they were 5 or 6 or 7 years old?
Senator, we continue to visit the issue and seek interpretations, but that is the interpretation we've been given at this point.
Okay. Well, obviously and respectfully, right, this is one that we are going to pursue. This isn't a committee hearing again to talk legislature or anything like that. I would like to see this fixed administratively, because the logic baffles me, and of course the law also speaks to fairness and equity always in the way we interpret the law. And again, it just does not make sense to me that somebody... I like the fact that you have waived the overpayment for the young adult. I think that's the right policy, because a kid is a kid is a kid, and that kid is not responsible at whatever age that overpayment occurred for the overpayment. And the net result years later for that young adult is that they may be not working, they may be in school, and to have to pay this money back is unfair. I like that. but it makes no sense at the same time for a child living in poverty to have their grant reduced by 5 or 10% just because some adult received an overpayment and didn't deal with it. Now it's years later and they're still a minor. It does not make any sense to me, and we need to provide relief to those kids, in my opinion.
I take your point, Senator.
Thank you. Senator Alquist?
Thank you, Mr. Pro Tem. I have welcome, and I have questions for both of you. I'll start with Mr. Lightburn. I've known you for many years. Certainly, this is a very important position, Director, Department of Social Services, and certainly warrants enough questions to be asked on the public record that the public can really understand. And we are part of the public, can really understand your positions. And these are basically the questions that I asked yesterday. I don't think there'll be any surprises. Back in 2010, the department received a $14.5 million federal grant to reduce entry and to improve permanency outcomes in foster care for 4 counties, one of which was Santa Clara County. The grant was awarded to target Native American and African American communities. I understand that nationally that these 2 minority groups disproportionately comprise large segments of foster youth, but in California, over half of our foster children population is Latino. And what's really interesting is that in Santa Clara County, as we've discussed, Latinos represent 35% of the population in my district. Yet in Santa Clara County, 64% of the foster youth population is Latino. So it's 35% of the population, but when it comes to foster youth, it is 64%. And I know we spent a lot of time talking about how the numbers happen to be that way, but the reality is that in Santa Clara County, there are numerous individuals as well as groups who feel that they are not really heard to what is happening to our Latino children in Santa Clara County. So I have some questions in this area for you. What steps will you take in terms of outreach, engage, and connect with the community to ensure that their concerns are heard and addressed? Would be my first one.
Thank you, Senator. Let me start from this perspective. The fact that a majority of the children in the child welfare system and foster care in California are Latino tells us that we have got to emphasize practice and development and approaches that reflect the need to serve that population on that sort of scale. And historically, there have not been those sorts of advances in the field. On the positive side, we've certainly seen a significant increase in the number of Latino students enrolled in Bachelor of Social Work and Master of Social Work programs in California. It's about 40% now in the publicly assisted MSW program, almost 50% in the Bachelor program. What we have to definitely be doing is sort of mentoring and developing those social workers as they come out and into the profession, into the leadership, to help shape the future of practice in the field. Additionally, conversations we've already had within the department have focused on the need to really sort of create advisory entities and groups of both community, interested parties, academics, and others to really start exploring what does the field know and practice know about the best possible services to Latino families and children.
So how are you going to do that? How does it show itself? How are you going to mentor and train? I look at your organization chart carefully, and I see that in the area that deals with foster children, you really don't have anyone who might have sensitivity to understand some of the issues facing our Latino children.
One of our challenges, it also presents something of an opportunity moving forward, which is in the sort of succession planning thinking of the state. The Department of Social Services probably has sort of the highest percentage of near retirement age senior officials of probably any department. And so as we begin the process of recruiting and mentoring and developing and training the next generation of leadership, certainly one of the big emphases we have to have is on developing the leadership that is knowledgeable, capable, reflective of the communities that we primarily serve. And so that's opportunity number one.
So what is your commitment in this area?
To lead it and do it.
Okay. And then on the issue of the disparity, as an example, in Santa Clara County, and it may be true in Los Angeles or some other places in the state, what is your commitment to decreasing that great disparity?
What we've already been talking with the counties about doing is being sure that each county is required to have a child welfare system improvement plan on a periodic basis, which is submitted to the state, reviewed by us, and rolls up ultimately into the state program improvement plan. In dialogue with the counties, there's agreement that one of the factors that we need to include in the system improvement plans moving forward is an analysis of what is the population makeup in that county's program, and be sure that, regardless of whether it's proportionate or disproportionate, that the resources, practice, capabilities, etc., are appropriate to serve who is in that community's population. And then, to the extent that there is disproportionality, have active plans to address what will be done over time to be sure that inequities are not occurring.
And is that your commitment?
Yes, absolutely.
So in terms of the advisory committees throughout the state, what is your commitment to seeing that they are formed, they actively meet, that there's some accountability built in, that you receive that input and take some of the good ideas so that people are heard?
To get them going over the next 3, 4, 5 months.
Okay, so in a 3 to 5 month period.
Right.
Okay, next one. Do you support the program improvement plans with timetables as other states have required?
California is, I'm assuming that means the program improvement plans that refer to ethnic composition issues. California is different from the other states that have done them that I'm familiar with, in that California is not a state-operated system or a state-supervised, county-operated system. So what we have to do is be sure that we're building it off county system improvement plans. The state by itself, it becomes a blunt instrument in that if we're just doing it in our plan. So what we'll be doing, as I was mentioning before, is working with counties to be sure that their system improvement plans are culture sensitive and ethnically based.
So I'm always looking for accountability and a connection and not a disconnect. So in just a sentence or two, can you explain to me and to us what is the role of your office in working with the counties in order to see that these plans for our children are implemented and that the plans are held accountable and that your office and department are held accountable?
Yes, Senator. First, we have the accountability responsibility as the single statewide agency for child welfare services, and that's an accountability both to you, the legislature, and to the federal government, which enables through federal legislation child welfare. In terms of the county system improvement plans, the counties are on a 5-year rolling schedule, so that with 58 counties, they can't all be done in the same cycles. And so as each county comes up, we'll be engaging them around this and addressing their system improvement plan in cycle, along with peer quality case review systems and other processes that we do interactively with them.
I hope that you will keep our pro tem involved in what is going on there. I know I've taken up a lot of time. I have really one more question and then just a quick statement on another issue because time is short. But the next question, back in 2010, the Senate Office of Oversight and Outcomes issued a report, Dangerous Caregivers, State Failed to Cross-Check Backgrounds Exposing Elderly to Abusive Workers. The report found that nurse assistants who had been decertified by the Department of Public Health while working in a skilled nursing facility due to a serious criminal or administrative action were getting approved by the Department of Social Services to work in residential care facilities. I've done, as you know, quite a bit of work in this area and carried legislation in the past. What type of information is shared between the two departments? How often is it reviewed, and how is the information used to help consumers?
Let me start the response to that, Senator, then I'm going to ask Pat Leary to continue it. And just to set the stage for that, when Pat joined us as Chief Deputy Director, one of the particular portfolios that we went to her was the licensing side of the agency. The issue that you reference, of course, is that Department of Social Services licensing and Department of Public Health have different grounds for exclusion of people from continued participation in programs, and they were sort of ships passing in the night. What we have since done is we've developed a monthly data interchange between the two departments that sort of match who has been excluded on the one side, who's been excluded on the other. And that has been happening. And what we've now been working on is sort of making sure that, in fact, there's follow-up based on it. And we know that the 2010 period, we can sort of track cross-exclusions that occurred, and we're now sort of following up on the 2011 side of it.
We discovered, I'll just give you an example, there were about 266 revocations last year that DPH sent us on the monthly basis, as the director noted. And of those, through investigation, we looked to see how many of them might be affiliated with facilities that we license, and then of those, how many are on that same, unfortunately, mismatched list between the two departments, and what actions we would take against those. And currently, out of the 266, I think there are less than 50 that were also in our system. And of those, there were about 20 that were still actively engaged, in other words, that were still employed. And so the actions that we'll take is to either immediately revoke or bar the individual from a facility if it's a serious enough offense and a thorough investigation was done. In some cases, we might do more investigation. Sometimes folks will surrender their license during a revocation hearing, and so there was never an actual hearing on it, so in which case those we'd follow up and investigate more. But each one is ultimately investigated against the standards in community care licensing.
Thank you. I mean, having one person with criminal background activity who's working in a residential care facility is one too many, let alone 20. And I'm not going to ask any more questions, but I want to mention on CalFresh, it's, even though it's federally funded, it's really an important program. It really helps a lot of seniors who can become isolated. And want to say, continue looking at the outreach there. And then I'm not going to ask any other questions right now. I'm sure my colleagues have questions. I do hope someone will ask about CMIPS, and if not, I can ask that later. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Alquist. Senator Fuller?
Hi. We briefly talked about the realignment of programs in last year's budget down to the county level, and just sort of like to go over for the record, what assurances can you give that the counties will be able to perform and manage the additional services given to them under realignment? Because they've been expressing a lot of concerns and worries to me.
Right. Let me start that, if I may, Senator. In the social services area of realignment, what happened in 2011 was the realignment of child welfare services. In fact, that's a service that has always, well, I say always, for decades has been performed at the county level. So it's not giving them much new activity beyond which pre-existed. What it did include, of course, was a move of the program funding directly into county budgets, which gives them a degree of flexibility going forward. Not unlimitedly, but gives them a degree of flexibility in that they now have the option as to whether they want to use the dollar exactly the way it had been when we were doing plan allocations. So to some extent, I think that's to the good side. On the side we still have to work things out on is the accountability, measurement, evaluation side, how to do it in a way that doesn't become burdensome or a big stick or a return to the bad old days when we were counting processes. Keeping it focused on the outcomes that AB 636 process sort of started for us, but do it in a way that we're able to provide practical assistance, make practical adjustments, and do it in a fashion that the counties truly feel we've been their partner, not either sort of disowning them because they've got problems or being overbearing towards them. It's going to be a sort of an iterative process going forward, and I'm sure we're going to adjust as we move.
Thank you. And have you engaged the counties in developing the funding structure of the realignment moving forward, or how are they going to get some assurance that they can make it in the future years?
Right. Obviously, to some extent, Senator, they are, and as are we, banking on the constitutional amendment that has not yet been enacted or been adopted. So there's an element of this is all good and well, assuming certain things happen. In terms of the actual funding allocation cycles, last year, the 2011 allocation was basically continuing the funding streams that existed and simply moving the funds. I know Department of Finance and CSAC, and through CSAC, CWDA have been engaged in how will growth be applied and under what circumstances and what order. And historically, I don't mean this in an unlimited way, but the tendency has been if the counties can agree on formulas that are fair and equitable among themselves, we've tended to honor that process so long as it hasn't left a clear, uncovered responsibility.
Thank you. And you anticipated my last question, so we don't have to really go there, but it is, will there be some sort of equalization funding for counties who may not receive the same funding as other counties, similar to the health equity sub-account from 1991? Right. And it sounds like they may
working
be
on
able
it,
to work together, all of you,
right,
to come up with what serves them best.
Yeah. Right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Fuller. Senator De Leon.
Thank you, Mr. Pro Tem. Mr. Lightbourne, I think in the line of the questioning from Senator Alquist, which very good questions from Senator Alquist. Let me ask you some similar questions, and because what I read from you was it was kind of vague and ambiguous, and perhaps a little more specificity. Okay. You know, you had articulated through the questions of Ms. Alquist a 3-to-1 overrepresentation of African Americans. We discussed it the other day with regards to African American children in the system itself, foster care in the aggregate with all the counties in the state of California. Latinos, roughly about 48% of the universe within the foster care program. What are very clear and specific goals that you'd like to attain with regards to those subsets specifically in the foster care universe?
Thank you, Senator. Let me try to be as specific as I can in response. First, if I could correct one number, the percentage of Latinos in the child welfare system statewide is about 52%, not 42. So I didn't. If I said 42 when we met earlier,
okay.
my bad. Here's where we've got to do two things simultaneously. Each decision made in evaluating the circumstances of a child, the danger to a child, what protective services, if any, a child might need, have to be made individually, one child at a time, because the circumstances will never be identical. That said, what we have learned over the last years is that the provision of early intervention, preventive, pre-petition services, that's before there's an action taken in court to try to take jurisdiction of a child. The provision of those services has a huge impact on reducing both later maltreatment and entry into care. If you look at the state over the last 8-9 years, the overall number of children coming into the child welfare system has declined a little less than 40% overall.
14 or 40?
14. Which is, on the one hand, I think, an important improvement in practice, and it reflects the widespread development of what some counties refer to as differential response, others as alternative response services, which are really provided on referral from the county to usually CBOs, who then can provide services on a voluntary basis to families. So good and well that we've got that going and moving. The parts that I was referring to when I was dialoguing with Senator Alquist was the actual practice innovations that people have a reason to believe, based on evidence, based on the field, would be particularly of value with Latino kids, is not as well developed as we would like it to be. And so part of what the next period of time is to really try to engage the academy and others to really look at research-based what we think works. This is going to be the majority of our caseload going forward. The overrepresentation of African American children, as well as Native American, although the numbers are much smaller, is a national issue. It's a statewide issue, et cetera. That's the sort of the practice interventions, including group decision making, family team decision making, and programs like that are really part of the 5-year federal grant that the state's participating in with 4 counties: Fresno, Humboldt, Los Angeles, Santa Clara. That is sort of trying to identify those practices that have particularly showed practice success with African American, Native American families. And then there's definitely attempts being made to mine that experience and mine that information to see what can be, by extension, applicable to particularly the Latino community, which is sort of our largest population.
Is there any data that demonstrates any type of success that can be duplicated?
It's a year into the project, early days yet. At this point, a lot of it is going into the community self-analysis to try to figure out what's working, what's not working. Obviously, a big piece of it is a degree of alienation in the community. I don't think that's a surprise to anybody, sort of a lack of comfort with the formal system.
Can I follow up on that, just that piece? Because it's just AB 636, which you referenced, which I was involved in some 10 years ago now, which was the foster care outcome, requiring counties to develop outcome measures. Maybe I missed it. If I did, excuse me. But isn't can you not use that sort of framework to actually set performance objectives for children by demographic or even by ethnicity? In other words, I think what the questions are asking essentially is the department going to hold counties in this instance to a set of standards and outcomes about what we expect for all kids, but for our diverse populations, whether it's reduced homelessness, whether it is increased safety, whether it's improved educational outcomes? That's what we're talking about here, right?
Yeah. I mean, an AB 636 creates sort of 6 primary outcome indicators and a bunch of sub-indicators, which can be, if the county's big enough and has enough of a population base for sampling purposes, can be looked at within each ethnic subgroup. To some extent, that's what some counties have already been doing, and what we want to do is sort of, as we do it through the system improvement plan process with counties, is really try to pursue that to the greatest extent possible without creating a whole new, enormous superstructure, but rather trying to embed it in the existing evaluative tools and data that we already have coming in.
Sorry to interrupt.
No. It's okay, please. No. So, if I understood your answer is that you are implementing components of, if I get it right, I wasn't here 10 years ago, AB 636 is part of your benchmark criteria, or you're not? Are you doing certain components?
AB 636 is being used overall over the entire state in every county to measure progress towards the desired goals and outcomes completely. I mean, it's on a quarterly basis. We give counties feedback on where they are on the composite indicators, the specific sub-indicators, et cetera. What it has not particularly been done on any sort of detailed uniform basis yet has been drilled down by subpopulation. It's rather looking at a whole county child welfare experience, things like frequency of visits, reunifications, repeat maltreatment, mistreatments in out-of-home care, et cetera, outcomes like that, which we measure. We both benchmark counties against themselves. So are they making progress quarter to quarter to quarter on the various indicators? We benchmark the state as a whole, our state overall making progress, and then we measure against a set of federal indicators through what's called the Child Family Research Review Project to see where we are vis-a-vis federal indicators. So it is very much in use.
So to be a little more specific, let's say the 3-to-1 overrepresentation of African Americans in the system today. Give me one or two things that you'd like to accomplish during your tenureship at the helm of this program. Obviously, many other programs, but this is a critical program. One or two things that you want to accomplish with regards to African Americans.
First, in the pilot counties that are under the federal grant that we're operating,
yes,
we want to sort of develop a sense of confidence in particular interventions that are showing results, and then spread those to what are called the replication counties. I think there are 12 counties lined up as first replicators, and then beyond the 12, go statewide. It's obviously dependent on, let's evaluate, make sure it's getting the outcomes we hope we're going to get from those. But it's absolutely to see that to success.
Okay, and how about Latinos? And the number again is 52%, right?
For Latinos.
In the system itself.
Right.
Okay, and for Latinos, what would be your benchmark goals? What outcomes do you want to see?
I want to see improved, well, first, to the extent we can reduce entries into care, that's step one.
Sure.
To the extent that we more quickly reunify those children who do enter the system, that's goal number 3. 2, to the extent that children are in out-of-home care, place them with relatives to the greatest extent humanly possible. And then for children who reunification doesn't occur that quickly, what are the outcomes that they experience in life domains while in care? Health outcomes, education outcomes, social development outcomes. But the primary is keep the child in their home, if it's human, if we can safely do it,
yeah.
And return them to home quickly if they can't be kept in their home initially. That's the goal.
Okay, and what is, in your opinion, what is the difference between cultural sensitivity and cultural competency?
I think cultural competency is that which we keep struggling towards, and I don't think we've hit anywhere yet. Cultural sensitivity is knowing that we've got a set of issues that present differently in different communities, and starting to document and be aware of that. The culturally competent system, when we get there, is that system which is able to see the world through the eyes of the person who is powerless, who does not have the resources, and be able to sort of operate through that lens.
And how does one, in your opinion, become culturally competent? Is it one who views the prism of the case population they're dealing with, who looks like them? Is it something that you acquire at a graduate program? Do you go out to a conference, to some great consultant comes and gives a PowerPoint presentation, and then you're certified as culturally competent? What does that look like in your eyes? How does one attain that?
I think the starting place, and it's probably the starting place of any good social welfare practitioner, is self-awareness. Okay. Knowing the limits we all bring to the moment that we're in. Then having the humility to learn from others. And if to the extent that I have seen our systems not be good at it, and there are many occasions of that, it's when the systems let themselves get pulled into essentially power struggles that are totally aside from serving the needs of the family.
Humility and the issue of power struggles, which I know we had that discussion the other day, and you broached that subject, and I did agree with your assessment with regards to the power struggle and what takes place as different subgroups, if you will perceive power or authority, right, whether it's manifested through a social worker or through a police officer or politician or whoever. They view it quite differently. One last thing I'd say is that obviously Ms. Alquist hit a note that is very critical with regards to the numbers of kids we have in the system itself and the dire consequences if we don't get them out of the system and they become institutionalized, and why it's really critical. Obviously, you're going to be at the helm with the largest state in the union with a large caseload, and we have to do everything possible. I know it's an issue of resources also too, and obviously we're keenly aware of our lack of resources. So it's a question of doing the most you can, getting the most, the bang out of the buck with, limited resources. So thank you very much, then, for your answers.
Thank you. A couple more questions I have. I'm sorry, I know most of these are directed to Mr. Lightbourne, but you're welcome to get right on in there, of course, Ms. Leary. The buck stops, right, with the director. Senator Alquist asked about a little bit about the CalFresh program, and it begs another question for me, which is, we know with CalFresh, which is the old food stamp program, that we draw down fewer federal funds than most any other state in the nation. It's underutilized. At the same time, we are beginning this health exchange where we're trying to enroll people who currently don't have health insurance and health insurance. We also know, for an example, that the earned income tax credit in this state is grossly undersubscribed. So I wonder whether or not at the department level or at the secretary's level there is discussion and an action plan towards using something, whether it be the health exchange, as the portal by which people who are eligible for more than one of these programs can sign up.
Yes. The thinking I think, is definitely that we need to get to a place where we've got, it's being referred to as no wrong door. If somebody seeking health benefits, either the subsidy program or the expanded Medi-Cal through the health exchange as a point of access, if the information that they are providing is suggestive of the fact that they have eligibility for the CalFresh program or the EITC or anything like that, we need to be sure that it's got a direct linkage, that it doesn't take further intervention to start that process. Similarly, somebody who's coming in to a county office for whatever it is they're seeking, we need to be sure that we've got that going, sort of interactively. The exchange is sort of still in their procurement process for their automation system, so we don't have a product yet that we can sort of say we know what it's going to do. Definitely, as we sort of do the SAWS modernization projects that were approved as part of last year's state budget, a big emphasis on our part is to be sure that we've got interchangeability of information with whatever the health exchange data system is, and that we've worked out something that for the consumer should be invisible. They shouldn't know where they are in that data interchange.
Let me flag for my own staff here and the members that this is an issue that ought to be taken up in Budget Subcommittee. We have to make sure that we're not getting so far out ahead on the health exchange database in ways that isn't considering how to maximize the utilization of these other programs, which, by the way, is the drawdown of more federal funds. And is it true, by the way, just for educational purposes, that the majority of people who receive food stamps in this state are working people?
Yes. Yes. We've got about what we call one in the non-assistance CalFresh program. They're getting no other benefit. So in many cases, probably most, they're working. We have a larger population there than are also in the CalWorks program getting assistance.
I understand. Okay, last question. Foster children are among the stated targeted population around California's Mental Health Services Act.
Right.
And I'd like to know what the department is doing to work with the mental health folks in California to ensure that the kids you're responsible for serving are taking maximum advantage, and the counties are taking maximum advantage of of drawing down those resources for foster children who have mental health needs?
They're sort of to come from at least two directions. First, there was, back in, I guess, 2002, the KTA lawsuit. That was a lawsuit against State Department of Social Services, State Department of Health Services, Los Angeles County, et cetera, on the grounds that mental health services were not being provided on the scale and frequency that were needed by foster youth. LA settled early. The state finally entered into settlement late last year. And through the KDA settlement process, there's an agreement on essentially providing packages and bundles of home-based mental health support services. The implementation process of that now is sort of going into the implementation process. A bunch of work groups under the special master who is sort of coordinating both between Department of Social Services, Department of Health Care Services, now that mental health is moving there.
Yes.
And so that activity is sort of going from that side. Separate from that, the Child Welfare Council of California started working on an out-of-county mental health provision analysis.
Familiar with that one,
right,
too.
To note where there were gaps in that service. They've been sort of working, the work group has been working with the council and with the secretary. And my expectation is those two efforts are now sort of merging and will become a joint effort to ensure that there's strong drawdown of EPSDT and other mental health services, as well as Prop 63 supported services, and close coordination with the county social service department in terms of placement and out-of-county placement.
That was a comprehensive answer, and I appreciate it, but it does.
Sorry.
Prop 63 is generating $1 billion a year, and the bulk of that money, 75% over time, is for so-called full-service partnerships that are for people with the most serious and chronic mental illnesses that put them at risk of homelessness and disability. And the foster kids, especially the emancipated foster kids, are prime on that list. So as opposed to all the interagency task force and trying to meld this and to implement KDA, and that's all fine. What are you doing to aggressively work with counties throughout the state to make sure that foster kids get a lion's share of that money? Because I assume that even with KDA and with all the other good things you're doing, that there is a big gap between those who are actually being served and those who need the service.
Candidly, Senator, I think it varies enormously from county to county.
Okay.
And one of the things that, again, back to the Child Welfare Council, but not the out-of-county placement issue, the whole area of prioritization of services for families and youth connected to the child welfare system, the foster care system, is one of those items that is being closely worked through. More to come. I don't think we're at an answer yet, but it's definitely something that we've got to pursue.
Okay. Senator Alquist, one more question?
Two more questions, please.
Go ahead if you can.
Okay. One's on CMIPS and one's on CalEARS. On the CMIPS, it's the IT system for IHSS. It was supposed to be fully operational by November of this year. Understand we're not going to meet that target. Ms. Leary, could you please describe the status of CMIPS today briefly, very briefly, and what issues have arisen that are delaying the implementation? Because after that, I want to ask a question on the CalEARS.
Sure.
So just go briefly.
CMIPS is the case management and payrolling system for the IHSS providers, over 400,000 providers in the state of California. We're in the process of updating that system and adding a lot of functionality to it, as the other system that we currently have is old and outdated. We had intended for the program to go into pilot status, actually not quite full implementation in November of this year, but we were set to go into pilot status in November of 2011. We actually had a go, no-go decision, as they say in the IT world, in October, where we looked at how they were performing and to see if we were ready to actually go to pilot status status and determined that at that time we were not ready, that there were still issues with data conversion and functionality that needed to be worked out before we actually put it in place. So we've now postponed the implementation of the pilot. We're currently awaiting a full schedule, full rollout schedule from the vendor, but we're anticipating maybe July or late summer implementation of that first pilot.
Okay. The last question. The new Federal Health Care Reform Act requires states to establish new eligibility and enrollment systems, combining eligibility determinations for Medicaid with the health benefit exchange. The exchange has released a request for development of CalEARS, the new system, California Healthcare Eligibility, Enrollment, and Retention System. Now, we don't want to miss that 2014 federal start date. Given what has happened with CMIPS, what can you say to give us assurance that we will meet this 2014 deadline? And what things will you do differently? And Mr. Lightbourn, if you have any comments also, what will you do differently to see that we stay on target, since we have to meet the deadline?
Right. Well, if I could just, it relates back to the comments that Senator Steinberg made earlier about the health benefit exchange and all the other systems and the functionality and integration between them. The CalHERS project is the IT system that the benefit exchange is creating to handle all this new enrollment into insurance come 2014. As you noted, that is an incredibly quick period of time in which to get up and running a statewide information technology system. And a lot of these other issues about integration of the other systems are really not, in order to get this up and running that quickly, are not able to be fully implemented at the same time. It's simply not going to be possible to get it up and running by 2014 and do that. So the sponsors of the system, which are the Health Benefit Exchange, the Department of Health Care Services, and Mr. MIB, have been working with us and other partners, Department of Insurance and Managed Care, to make sure that the functionality or the potential for functionality is built into the system later on. For example, the part of the RFP that you noted that's out there right now, or the solicitation that's out there right now, is going to require that whoever the vendor is that gets the award would be able to populate into all of our other systems the data that somebody enters when they apply for insurance. So if somebody was applying for Medicaid, that would be able to be transferred over to a CalFresh application in one of the SAWS systems. And then after this bubble of implementation in 2014 comes into play, that's when full integration or the discussion of what comes next and how it can work with the other systems will occur.
Thank you. As I authored the legislation that created the Health Benefit Exchange, as the mama, so to speak, I really want to see that we stay on target on that. It's going to take an awful lot of pieces to come together in a timely fashion. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you, Senator. Okay, let's hear from the public. Witnesses in support of either or both nominees, please come up. We've got a microphone there by Mr. Torres's desk. As always, I ask you to be thorough and extremely succinct and brief.
Mr. Chairman, members, Casey Young with AARP. As the chairman noted, this is a very, very difficult time, especially in this area, budgetarily and in a lot of ways. It's very, very important, we believe, to have somebody with Mr. Lightbourn's experience and background and compassion for the clients of these programs. He doesn't independently make policy, but I'm very comfortable that he's a voice in those policy discussions within the administration. We urge his confirmation.
Gary Passmore with the Congress of California Seniors, Mr. Chair and members. We are also here in support of Director Lightbourn's nomination, and I guess note that over 4.5 million seniors in California today, doubling within a generation, and many of them, unfortunately, find themselves in need of the services of this agency. And we think he has both the personal integrity and the professional experience to help us out.
Thank you very much. Erner?
Dion
Former
Erner.
colleague.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. First of all, on behalf of Hewlett-Packard, right, who is the vendor in CMIP's Senator Alquist.
Dion Erner. Dion Erner.
Oh, I'm...
That's not my name. That's
Good
her.
afternoon. Right. Oh, I'm sorry for the... I'm terribly sorry. All right. On behalf of Hewlett-Packard, we are very, very supportive of both of the appointments. It's a pleasure to be here. Hewlett-Packard is the vendor in the CMIP's contract and continues to work with the agency in order to successfully conclude the bringing up of that system. But I'd also like to take a moment of personal privilege, if you don't mind. I was thinking as I was driving up that 45 years I've been doing this now. When I started as a social worker, Will and I have known each other almost that long, believe it or not. Right, and Pat and I have known each other since we both came to staff the legislature, and we did do CalWorks together. This is the best it's going to get, everybody. I have worked with so many different welfare directors over the years, and this is just phenomenal. The governor has chosen two people here who really understand the systems. They understand the people that they are serving. They understand what change means, right, and how to make effective change. So it's personally, I support this as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dion. Next, sir.
Yes. Reverend Deacon Sal Alvarez, and I represent a coalition of Latino civil rights organizations that are in support of Mr. Lightbourne's appointment and confirmation by the State Senate. First, Dolores Huerta, co-founder of the United Farm Workers, is supporting his appointment, and she's the president of the Dolores Huerta Foundation. I'm the vice president of that foundation. California League of United Latin American Citizens, LULAC, is in full support of his appointment. We have the La Raza Roundtable de California, based out of San Jose, that's in support, and of course the interfaith community of Latino clergy. We want to thank the Senator Alquist and Senator De Leon for the questions that were asked. We have talked with Mr. Lightbourne about these concerns of inequities in the child welfare system, the lack of real teeth in terms of the reduction and elimination that has been required in this, by the legislature in Texas, Wisconsin, Michigan, and Washington. Those states require the elimination of the inequities and overrepresentation, and certainly address the underrepresentation of Latinos in the state social welfare system, and particularly in many of the county welfare systems. Thank you very much.
Thank you for testifying, sir. Ask everyone again if you can be brief. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Mike Carroll with the Western Center on Law and Poverty. We are here also to support both Pat Leary and Will Lightbourne for their positions at the Department of Social Services. And I just want to echo former Assemblymember Erner's comments. There's a breath of fresh air at the department, and it's very welcome. When Mr. Lightbourne first came on, we had a long list of issues that we had been trying to get resolved for a long time. He went through them with some speed. We were very impressed. He came back and asked for a second list. We're in the process of producing that. This is really what we were hoping when he came on. We're seeing the results already. He does say no to us, however, on occasion, which we sometimes get frustrated with, but that's his job too. We continue, of course, to have concerns about the administration's CalWorks proposals, but we look forward to working with both the administration and the legislature to come up with a program that maintains the country's best anti-poverty program. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, good afternoon. My name is Kevin Asdenina with the Coalition for California Welfare Rights Organizations.
Slower, a little slower.
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
And I've been doing this for about 40 years, and this is the first time that I've appeared before this committee to support State Welfare Director and the Chief Deputy Director. And as the previous testimony was, we've been working pretty close with him. Sometimes we agree, sometimes we disagree. For example, when they make these budget proposals, they call them reform. We look at them as deform. So to that extent, we disagree. Otherwise, we urge an aye vote. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ronald Coleman here on behalf of the California Immigrant Policy Center, also here to support Mr. Lightbourne's confirmation. A major part of our work is around healthcare and public benefits, and the Department of Social Services is going to be extremely important to that work. He has done a tremendous amount of work on state food programs like CalFresh and the California Food Assistance Program that supports many low-income families across our state. And in his work at the county level, he was definitely a fighter of all of California's poor families and fought to make sure that programs were successful for all families, including families with mixed status immigration. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Trent Rohr. I'm the Executive Director of the Human Services Agency in San Francisco. I've had the pleasure of working with and knowing Will for almost 16 years, first as his Chief Policy Analyst and Chief of Staff in San Francisco, and then alongside him when he was Director at Santa Clara and me in San Francisco. And I must say he's the rare combination of integrity and analytical skills and administrative acumen and political acumen and policy expertise, and really one of the finest public human services minds in the country, and California would be lucky to have him. He also really deeply understands the state-county partnership that is so fundamental to delivery of public human services.
Key now. Yes. Support. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
I'm Julie Reif with Catholic Charities of California United, and we're here to give our strong support for Mr. Lightbourne's appointment. Our experience with him has been overwhelmingly positive. He has been extremely responsive and has been generous with his expertise, giving us ideas and specific advice on how to further our outreach programs to our CalFresh recipients. So we give our strongest support to him and wish him all the best. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate your testimony.
Good afternoon. Sawait Heshjasium here representing UDW AFSCME. We represent 66,000 providers, in-home care providers in the state of California. The IHSS program provides eligible low-income, aged, blind, disabled adults with the care they need to remain safely in their homes. DSS plays a critical role in the lives of our members and the consumers they serve. And we believe it's important that the leadership there understands the needs of our providers and the consumers they care for. With that in mind, we're proud to support the confirmation of both Will and Pat. Thank you.
Thank you very much for testifying. Assembly Member. Supervisor.
Hello, I'm Helen Thompson. It's nice to be here. I'm really happy to hear about Mr. Lightbourne since I don't know him very well, but he's very lucky to have Pat Leary working with him. And I just want to say that I've worked with Pat for almost 30 years as a county supervisor at CSAC, as an officer, and as a legislator. Not only is she smart, but she has a really good head of sensitivity, but a big heart. She's practical, she has good common sense, and she's a problem solver. And if we don't need anything, it's problem solving. So good luck, and thank you for letting me.
Thank you very much for coming back.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. Kathy Sunderling McDonald with the County Welfare Directors Association. We're pleased to support both Director Lightbourne and Pat Leary's appointments here today. When Will was on our board, he was a valued colleague of our 58 county human services directors, as well as a mentor to me and the other staff. Now he's a valued partner in his new position as the director. He has a rich understanding of how counties work, what the families that we serve are going through, and we have tremendous confidence in both his leadership and oversight for the state and the programs that we operate on the state's behalf. Similarly, I've known Pat since I was at the Legislative Analyst's Office, and she worked at the Senate Budget Committee, a position that I followed her in. And I'm very pleased to be here today to support my friend and colleague. Thank you. We urge your support for both nominations.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Hi, Tia Orr on behalf of the Service Employees International Union. As all of you know, we represent nearly 700,000 workers across the state of California. Specifically, our social service workers include the CalWORKS eligibility workers, social workers and child welfare services, Medi-Cal eligibility workers, and many others. Will Lightbourne has been a strong supporter and a strong advocate for many of the issue areas that we are involved in. I would say briefly, in a short amount of time that he's been here, we've actually had an open door stakeholder process where our workers have actually been able to come to the table and tell their stories and recommend certain policy and streamlining of the programs. We thank Will for allowing that, and we believe that we'll be able to continue that if he is appointed. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Senators. Leticia Alejandres, Executive Director of the California Family Resource Association. We represent over 200 community-based family resource centers in each of the 58 counties, which provide an array of social services and supports to low-income, vulnerable families and primarily communities of color. We support Mr. Lightbourne's appointment and urge your confirmation. Mr. Lightbourne brings tremendous experience, expertise, and leadership to the department from both the community and state levels, and he is well respected in the nonprofit and community-based fields. He has worked with many of our members at the community level. Mr. Lightbourne has demonstrated commitment to greater transparency and stakeholder participation in the decision-making and problem-solving, which leads to better policies for California. These are incredibly difficult times in the social services arena, but Mr. Lightbourne has the integrity, experience, and background to head the department, so we urge your approval.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Jim Wiltshire, Deputy Director of the California State Association of Counties. Clearly, you'd suspect that we are very pleased to see folks with county experience in these roles. On a personal note, I have known Pat for 15 years and couldn't be more pleased to see her in this capacity and have a friend of CSAC or just a personal friend in this position, and urge her
we sure appreciate the way counties, CSAC especially, have dealt with the challenges we've faced over the last couple of years, including working so cooperatively on realignment. Thank you.
Stephanie Hodson with United Ways of California, and also on behalf of 211 California. We wanted to support Mr. Lightbourne's appointment, and I'd like to echo all the comments that you've heard about the transparency and accountability that Mr. Lightbourne has brought to the agency already, and we look forward to working with him even more in the future.
Very good. Thank you.
Kathy Mossberg, representing the California Association of Food Banks, and our food banks have worked with Mr. Lightbourne over the years, and certainly in the last year, and want to just urge your support of his confirmation. He has been a strong supporter of both the food banks and the CalFresh program, so we couldn't have a better partner. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, Tom Riley with the California Academy of Family Physicians. I've known Mr. Lightbourne for more than 25 years, and I've known Pat for almost that long, and I can tell you that the state should be very proud to have both of these individuals working for you.
Thank you. Are there any witnesses in opposition to the nominees? If not, I'm pleased to accept a motion by Senator Ahlquist that would move your nominations to the... I'm sorry, Senator Dutton had a comment. I apologize, Senator Dutton.
Well, I just want to make... I unfortunately had to cancel our meeting to sit down and talk to you about some issues and stuff, and so I'm going to abstain at this time, but I look forward to being able to support you when your nomination comes to the floor, and after which time I'm sure we'll have a chance to chat a little bit. Thank you.
Thank you. Just saying, I'm happy to support both of you in moving your nominations to the floor. There are people who are obviously dedicated in their head and in their heart to public service, and I think both of you amply meet that definition during tough times. These are tough times. I am going to press you and want to continue to work with you over the next couple of weeks on this issue of overpayment against kids. I just can't let it stand, and I don't think we should. And I think we need to get in one interpretation from one lawyer. I think we need a couple more lawyers in the room. So, yeah, or be quiet, Senator Dutton. We want to intensify those discussions over the next several weeks. All right? But thank you and congratulations. Please call the roll on Senator Ahlquist's motion.
Senators Ahlquist? Aye. Ahlquist, aye. DeLeon? Aye. DeLeon, aye. Fuller? Aye. Fuller, aye. Dutton? Steinberg?
Aye.
Steinberg, aye.
That's 4-0 to proceed to the floor. Thank you very much. Let's take a 10-minute break. Thank you.